Hello and welcome to another episode of Exploring Standards. I am your host, Jess, and today I'm incredibly excited to be joined by the CEO of Auva, Michael Venner. Michael, how are you today?
I'm good. Yourself?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for joining me on the show. Our podcast today is all about preparing for certification audits and sort of what auditors really look for. So obviously certification is quite an intimidating process of the implementation and certification of the ISO management systems. And so today we're going to really dig into that. Before we get into the episode, though, I do have to a small caveat and say that obviously Assent Risk Management is an independent consultancy firm, and we don't actually recommend any particular certification body, but we are very pleased to have Auva on the show today to sort of give us more about the certification audit process and preparing for it. So before we really get into the juicy bits though, Michael, would you like to introduce yourself and Auva as well?
Okay, that's a good caveat actually, because that's something UCAS always checks on, that consultants are independent and never really pushing any specific one. So that's a good caveat. So hopefully UCAS are listening in on this.
Yeah.
So Michael Venner from Auva Certification. We are UCAS accredited for. We do 9001, 14001, 45001, like the three common ones. We also specialise in aerospace. So we do the AS9100 and AS9120. And we're also just waiting on UCAS approval for 27001, which is information security. Okay. We've been accredited since about mid-2019, but all of us partners came from previous certification bodies. So I think I've been in the industry about 22 years now. So seen quite a few changes over the years. So,
seen it all then, yeah.
Yeah, quite a few changes, yeah. And seeing what's going to come for the next 20 years as well. So It's an interesting landscape.
Yeah, there's a lot of big changes at the moment going on. We were just talking about like AI and everything like that and how that's kind of changed the landscape as well. So it will be interesting.
It's hard to keep up on it, to be honest. It's because it's constantly changing, evolving, and it's a lot of work. Not from just our side, but also client side as well. So
keep up to date with everything. It's a lot, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what are the key things auditors are really looking for during certification audits?
Okay. There's a few things really that we're looking at. Obviously, we're looking out for compliance as a key thing. That's what we're there for. But from a client's perspective, it's very much we're looking for openness. Really, our client's open, not trying to hide things. I think so. If someone's preparing for an audit, I think there's a lot of fear around auditors coming in. We get audited ourselves by UCAS, and there is that. What's going to happen? Someone coming in and inspecting us and that type of thing. But we find it goes a lot easier when people are just open, answering questions, I should say, quite directly. Yeah, we don't need loads of waffle and everything like that. It's up to us to probe where we need to probe. But really just share with us your processes, talk us through it, show us the records where we're needed. In a nutshell, that's what we're looking for. We like to build the relationships with the clients, the auditees, put them at ease. Because the more open they are, the easier the audit goes. The whole process is just a lot smoother. We're not there to catch anyone out.
Yeah. That's something that I've heard. Obviously we've done a couple of podcasts around this topic. They're always very similar, and auditors always say, we're not here to catch you out. That's not our job. And I do like that piece of advice about being open and transparent, because obviously that then makes it a lot smoother and a lot more.
Not just smoother, but it's also, I don't know, it just puts everyone at ease, and I think it's a lot more comfortable for everyone.
Calm, probably.
Calm, and you don't come away from the audit really sort of stressed out, and you feel like you've had I don't want to say everyone enjoys an audit, but it was a fairly pleasant process in the big scheme of things.
Yeah. It's not like someone with like a single looking at you, like asking all these questions, and you're like, oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some people, when they come around to their first ever audit, it's very daunting, and there's a lot of fear there. We hear some horror stories from the client side where they've just been up all night, couldn't sleep, just stressed about everything, been worried about it for ages.
Yeah.
But actually, after the audit's gone through, they're actually put more at ease, and they find actually that wasn't as bad as what we perceived. And then hopefully the following audits are better for them, better sort of journey. I mean, I still stress about them when I have UCAS, but it's because you care. I say it's because you care. If you worry about it, it's because you care and you want to get it right.
Yeah, no, I think you're completely right. And I guess for you guys as well, hearing that feedback of actually it wasn't as horrible as we thought it was going to be must be a massive relief, because I was thinking you're also doing your job correctly. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
You're not there to be intimidating. Yeah.
No, we try not to be. I think there are unfortunately, some auditors out there that do that and give the industry a little bit of a bad name, but that's not what we're about. It's not how it should be either.
No, we completely agree. So, obviously, you've been in auditing, as you said, this industry for quite some time. What are some of the most common mistakes or misconceptions you see from organizations who were preparing for their first certification audit?
Some of the common mistakes. Okay. I think a lot of people don't communicate internally what's got to be done to make everyone aware.
Yeah.
Sometimes we rock up and we start auditing someone and we sort of say, do you know why we're here? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, well, need to prepare everyone, I think. I think that's a big one. I think what we alluded to earlier, the misconception about us there to catch people out, that's incorrect. We're not there to do that. We ask some probing questions sometimes, just because we're trying to get to the answer. We have to follow the audit trail sometimes. So, we're not there to catch anyone. There's no trick questions. And sometimes we might ask what may be seen as a daft question. And people think, wonder why they're asking that. Or it might be like a self-explanatory one, but we have to ask those types of questions sometimes just to satisfy what we've got to cover. So again, we're not trying to catch anyone out. Sometimes we ask daft questions. Yeah, it's just part of the process, really. We'll go through. I'd say something that people, our old accountant used to say something. If someone asks what today is, tell them the day is Monday, not tomorrow's Tuesday. So then sometimes just answer the question. Sometimes people go off on a big tangent and they start feeling they've got to satisfy the quiet noise or something like that, or keep talking to us. But no, sometimes it's just I'll answer the question.
Don't overthink it.
Like that. Don't overthink it. Yeah, definitely. Trying to think what else people can do. I think there's another thing that people try and hide things.
Okay.
And we can usually catch it out, and people try and tell us stories. Like we look at a job card and there's like some boxes aren't ticked and things like that and not signed off. And they'll just create a story as if it's much easier for them just to sort of say, yep, sorry, that should have been done. And then we move on. Because if it smells wrong, we'll just keep digging and digging and digging until, we find the problem. But just like people are just open. Just be open and honest with certain things. And then we can all move on. We won't make a big deal out of anything.
Because mistakes happen, don't they? Naturally, things aren't always going to be perfect, because that's just life, isn't it? We're all human. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we make mistakes as well. So when UCAS come in, we're like, yep, hands up. That's not how it should be. This is how it should be.
Yeah.
We made a mistake there. And we're dealing with humans at the end of the day. So that's what makes us unique.
Yeah, no, definitely. So then, how important is documentation versus implementation? Obviously, is one weighed heavier than the other, or kind of what about that?
I suppose it depends on what you mean by documentation. If it's records, then obviously that's more important. But if you're talking documentation from a procedural perspective, is your procedure documented? I'd say it's less important.
Okay.
The older standards, sort of the versions, you needed quite documented procedures and things like that, and it was quite quite restrictive. But I think with the way the standards are gone nowadays, it's more about us talking to people, listening to what they're going to say, listening to the processes, and working through those processes to make sure they align with the standard. We will check on procedures and things like that for certain little bits. But if you ask me, I'd rather someone just shows me what they do and we'll follow through that process. I don't want to be sitting there all day looking at procedures, trying to catch someone out of what it says.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in the intent and what they're doing. Don't get me wrong. If I go in and audit 10 different people and they're all doing different things, then, well, hang on a minute, your procedure needs to be properly tightened up. But if they're all following the same principle, I'm not going to get too hung up on a few words here or there in a procedure. It doesn't add any value to the process, really.
Yeah. I think there used to be this like misconception, or how it really was that ISOs were just document heavy, weren't they? Like it was just, you've got the big folders are coming out and it's all about documentation. And as you say now, you're kind of moving away from that, and implementation and the processes are more and more important.
Yeah, and it's, when we go in and audit someone and then can I see your procedures, they'll bring a folder off, blow the dust off it, and put it down. I'm like, well, there's obviously not any value in them documenting these. I'll go and see what they're doing, because I think they're obviously not paying much attention to them. So let's go and audit a process. And if they're following what the standard requires and it all looks good, then who am I going to argue with a procedure is fully documented or not? There's no value to it.
Yeah, I think I can understand that, and I think some of our listeners are going to be like, "Whew, that's good to know that we don't have to get those big folders back out again," because they were helping everybody.
Yeah, it's not paperwork like it used to be. Definitely not. It's moved totally away from that, and I think that's kind of gone that way with the digital revolution. Really, that if a lot of people are using CRMs and ERPs, MRP systems, I don't need a procedure to tell me tick this box, do that, do this, because the system often controls what you've got to do anyway. So why document it? It's of no value. You've got to fill this in, otherwise you can't move on, type thing. So don't worry about the documents.
Makes total sense. Okay, then. So what advice would you give to organizations on how to prepare their teams for audit day itself? So obviously you did just touch lightly on that, making sure that you've communicated with them so they know what's going on. But what else? What other bits of advice you could give?
Yeah, the key bit is communicate with them. Tell everyone what it is. Tell everyone to be open, not to be fearful. Tell everyone not to go on holiday, because we get a lot of that. I think the number one thing is just be open, if I'm being honest, that just we come round, we may pick some people, we may not pick others. We're not picking on people, which, if I go around a machine shop and there's 20 machines, I'm just going to pick 2 or 3 machines and watch what's going on at that one time. I'm not targeting a specific person or anything like that. So if you get chosen at random through that process, just answer the questions honestly. And if you don't know the answer, the best thing to always do is just say, I don't know the answer, go and speak to my manager. Again, people they feel like they've got to know the answer. Not everyone knows everything, and we may be asking you a question that's not your responsibility. So just tell the people, just be honest, be open. If you don't know it, put your hands up. We can then go follow. We won't say he didn't know the answer or she didn't know the answer. That's a failure. We'll follow that trail further and we'll say, okay, let's go and speak to a manager. Maybe they know the answer, or something like that. Just don't try and hide things. As I said, just be open.
That's it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Really, I think it's the best thing. You don't need to overburden people with what's going to go on in the day. To be wrapped up in it. We might ask questions about KPIs or objectives, quality policy, things like that. So if people have got a general awareness of what's going on, make sure people know what we're there to do, just what their role is in their day-to-day job.
Fairly straightforward. Just don't overthink it. Be honest.
That's the easiest thing, because yeah, it's just much easier, goes smoother for everyone if they're just very open. And we often put that in our reports. If we've gone through an audit and we find that everyone's been very open, friendly, we don't bite. We can chat about random stuff as well, weather, the kids, whatever. We often write in the reports that it's been very open and good audit.
I think that's maybe something for people can understand, is that also you are human too. Do you know what I mean? Like, as much as they're human and might make mistakes or, might not know everything, also you're human too. And, you can goes both ways.
And sometimes we misunderstand things. So at the end of a little process audit, we should confirm things. And if we're wrong, just say, no, that you've misunderstood that or something, and correct us. Because, like I say, we make mistakes. We may mishear things. And feel free to ask us random questions as well, where we live or something like that, if it puts them at ease. It's whatever. We try and walk up and be a little bit friendly, how long you worked here, things like that, and it just puts people at ease. They can talk to us. We don't bite.
I love that. So how are findings reported, and what are the next steps if non-conformances are identified?
Okay, so each certification body is slightly different in how they report them. We have a separate form ourselves. So if we do find anything, we tell you at the time. We don't wait until the end of a 5-day audit and say, there we go, there's 17 findings. When you thought everything was hunky-dory, that's not how it works. So I've heard auditors doing that. So we discuss it at the time, and generally if it's over a few days, we'll have a little wash up each day anyway. So you should kind of get a feeling on how the audits are going and the findings that are being raised. But when we present them, there should be a clear statement of non-conformity. So it should really sort of say, this is what the standard asks for, and this is what you're not doing. Or this is what your procedure says, and this is not what you're doing. So it should be quite clear. And then we should also provide some objective evidence for that. So it might be, I looked at job number 1, 2, 3, and all of the operations weren't signed off, just as an example. Okay, so it should be quite clear. So if they do need to, once we've left site, to go back and verify something, they should be able to go and pick that job card up and then just verify that what we were talking, so it's clear in their heads. Okay. I say to people, there's not a magic number. Some people think, have I got 10 and then I'm out type thing? No, the findings are the findings. We'll keep going, and the number is the number. We don't just stop. We don't say, we've won. See you next time.
I think that goes into that. It's not a pass or fail, is it? We're not going to get to, you have to have this many, or by this many you're going to fail. This is the system, and this is what you need to fix.
It doesn't happen that way. So it's purely, there we go, and there's the findings. You go off and work on them. We'll ask for corrective action, root cause analysis, and it depends on the nature. Sometimes we ask for certain containment and things like that. That bit's very important, that people get that bit right, because it can slow down the whole process for you getting your certification. We will get corrective action submitted afterwards. This is what we're doing to fix it, and quite often the root cause will be human error, and then put in a new form as the corrective action. Well, that doesn't really address the issue. So I think some people pay a bit lip service to it. So it's really important they get sufficient detail. We don't need chains and waffle in them, but we need to be able to see quite clearly that you've done an investigation and this is the root cause, and this will fix it. Another common thing that people do is they'll identify a root cause and the corrective action won't fix that root cause.
Right.
It'll be something totally tangent. And it just doesn't fix it. So we'll then go back and say, well, you've said what's wrong, but you haven't addressed it. So you're going to have the same issue over and over and over.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's important they actually spend a bit of time going through that process.
Yeah.
Then they can submit that to us. Often it's with some evidence. It depends on the type of audit you're going through. Surveillance, probably not evidence, but initials, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
That could be submitted. We'll then review it, approve it, and then that will then go for decision making at that point. Okay, it may go back and forth a couple of times between the organisation and us, just to clarify a few points, because the worst thing to do is us then sign it off, come in next year, and we've got the same problem.
Yeah.
Okay, because that says your corrective actions weren't effective. That's why it's important to spend quite a bit of time on that. Okay, like I said, there's not a magic number, so don't worry. And if we say major or minor, it doesn't matter too much, because the process for closing them out is exactly the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Some people worry, major means that's it, I've failed. No, you don't fail. It's just sometimes we have to categorize them as that, depending on the nature of them. But the actions are exactly the same. Worst case scenario is we have to come back for a little follow-up visit just to verify some corrective actions. Argument's sake, calibration. Yeah, if we found some gauges weren't calibrated and being used, it's quite hard to verify that remotely. So we might have to come back on site just to do a sweep, a mini audit as such, just to pick up a few gauges, make sure everything's calibrated.
Yeah.
One thing I do sort of recommend to people, though, in the corrective actions, it's always quite good to have some kind of ongoing monitoring process. So let's just sticking with the calibration scenario. If your corrective action says we're going to audit this once a month, a mini audit of that process to make sure we got all the calibration bottomed out, that inspires confidence. So we're like, okay, that's good. You're going to keep an eye on it. So that it then just makes the whole closure process a lot easier. Yeah. That's
that
kind
makes
of the
sense.
process. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Right. Going into our final question then. Top tips for organizations that want to not just pass their audit, but genuinely use this to improve their processes and drive improvement.
Okay. I guess not just playing lip service to it and ticking a box. A lot of people do certain things for just, we need objectives, for example, and they'll just put in something quite wishy-washy. And we'll go, yeah, you've got something there and it ticks a box, but really does it drive something? So there's another standard, actually, which isn't certifiable. I don't know if you're aware of it, ISO 9004.
Okay.
I highly recommend people look at that. So you know how there's a pass or fail. You either get your certificate or you don't. The ISO 9004 standard kind of builds in it's not a gold, silver and bronze, but it takes it to the next level. Okay. Yep. So just argument's sake about internal communication and your objectives and things like that, it throws things in such as building a culture. How do you communicate through leadership, building that culture? Right, there's loads of little bits in there and it just bolsters it up. And right at the end of it, the standard, there's like a benchmarking matrix. So you can actually benchmark yourself against industry peers. Okay. So argument's sake, suppliers, it will say level 1 is 1 to 5, if I remember rightly. Haven't looked at it for a little while. Will be, are you just transactional? You just buy something, comes in, and then it goes all the way up the chain through development to the final part will be your relationships with your suppliers. It's like a very much a partnership. So you're developing that partnership with those suppliers. You get a better service, they get more repeat work, and then everyone's in a bit better communication, things like that. So it's a really good standard. Like I say, it's not certifiable. So we don't come in and audit to it to get a certificate to it. But if there's an organisation that's kind of hit a plateau, they've done 9001 and it's not driving them enough, I recommend they look at that standard, because there's lots of good tips in there and they can take little bits out and sort of think, okay, I like that idea, especially around the culture. Yeah, we need to improve our culture, and there's quite a bit of guidance in there for that. So that's something I would recommend. Yeah.
I love that. I think when you say about the plateau, finding ways that you can kind of continue to drive improvement. And I said, if it's not a certifiable standard, you can just pick and choose what you want. That's going to help you to improve your standard. That's great.
Yeah,
well, thank you very much.
Really good bits. Yeah, no problem.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Exploring Standards. I really do hope that you've enjoyed the show. Thank you, Michael, for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So if you have enjoyed today's episode, please make sure you rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the podcast. If there's any topics that you'd like to know about or like us to explore, please let us know. And we'll be back with an episode in a couple of weeks.